Very good evening from Colombo, Sri Lanka. This is Dr. Pamod Amarkon representing Health Informatics Society of Sri Lanka. I would like to warmly welcome all of you around the globe for the special AeHIN Hour Introduction to OpenMRS and its ecosystem. Today's event is special because it's the first of the series of capacity building programs on e-health brought to you by the Sri Lankan Community Interoperability Lab of Asia eHealth Information Network and the global OpenMRS community. We are privileged to have with us today several experts of health informatics in the Asian region, including Professor Vajra Disanayake, the President of Health Informatics Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Alvin Marcello, AeHIN Executive Director, Dr. Roshan Hewapatirana, CEO of HISSL, and many others. We have a full house today exceeding over 100 attendees currently registered in WebEx. Thank you all for joining. We would also like to thank all of you who have responded to our online questionnaire to decide on direction and future sessions of this training program. We will inform you on the topics and the dates of future sessions in due time. Since this would be the first regional event of Sri Lankan Community Interoperability Lab, I would like to invite Professor Vajra Disanayake, the Manager of Sri Lankan Community Interoperability Lab, as well as the President of Health Informatics Society of Sri Lanka, to make a welcome note. Over to you, sir.
Hi, thank you, Pramod, for that introduction. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure for the Sri Lanka CIEL to conduct this workshop, this open MRS webinar in collaboration with the Asian eHealth Information Network. I'd like to, at the outset, acknowledge the contribution of Dr. Alvin Marcello, who initiated AeHIN, as well as the idea of the community of interoperability labs. We are privileged to be a part of the community, and I hope that what we start today can grow, and we will be able to, in collaboration with various partners that we have built across the world, bring to you quality e-health training. So I would like to also, in that note, thank OpenMRS, especially Suranga and Paul, for readily agreeing to join up with us to conduct these series of webinars. I hope all of you would benefit from this and will enjoy it. So over to Pramod again. We hope to see all of you at future webinars too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Before moving on to today's session, I will briefly mention a few things to remember while using WebEx platform. Once you have logged into WebEx, the left panel is where you shall see the content presented by the panelists, including the PowerPoint presentations, videos, etc. The right panel contains some useful tools. If you click on Participants icon, it will display all panelists and attendees currently logged in to the event. Q&A button can be used to ask questions from the panelists. You can also provide feedback during the presentation by clicking on applause, yes, no, too fast, too slow, and laughter buttons. Please note that your microphone will be automatically muted once you join as an attendee. If you encounter any issues in receiving audio during the webinar, please log out from the WebEx platform and try to re-log in. Since today's AeHIN Hour is the first of a series of online training programs, we would like to keep it interactive as much as possible. The entire session will be divided under several headings. At completion of each, we would have a Q&A session. Kindly send us your questions in the Q&A panel so that we can forward them to the resource person. If you are available to be connected via audio, provided you have a good internet connectivity and minimum background noise, please mention that in the Q&A panel as well. Moving on to the resource person for today's special AeHIN Hour, he is Suranga Kasiraratne, the Regional Community Manager of Asia Pacific Region for OpenMRS. A brief introduction on Suranga. He has obtained his bachelor's degree in software engineering from University of Westminster, UK in 2013 with first-class honours. He has special interest in clinical decision support, health standards, health information architecture, and being an early adopter of OpenMRS. In addition to being an experienced implementer and a trainer in OpenMRS community for over 7 years, his contributions also include designing of OpenMRS Developer's Guide and OpenMRS CDA Generator module. He's also a Google Summer of Code mentor as well as co-organization administrator for OpenMRS. And he is the Regional Community Manager for Asia Pacific region for OpenMRS since 2014. He's currently reading for his PhD in Health Informatics at Indiana University, Indianapolis. Without further ado, I would like to invite Suranga to start the session. Over to you, Suranga.
Thank you, Megan. Can you hear me?
Yes, Suranga, we can hear you.
Hello, everybody. Please give me a few minutes while I share my PowerPoint presentation. Right. I'm assuming that you can see my slides.
Yes, Suranga, we can see. Thanks.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. This is the first time I'm addressing the AeHIN community, and I hope that this will be the first of many such presentations to come. To start off, I'll be talking to you about OpenMRS and taking you through the first few introductory steps. I've named this presentation the first few steps because that's what I'm hoping it will be. Hopefully, there's going to be many more presentations of this nature to come, and hopefully you'll learn a lot about the OpenMRS community and how we work in the future. So what I'm hoping to cover, I'll start with what OpenMRS is. I'll provide you with a very brief overview of what OpenMRS is and its functionalities. I'll explain our major feature list and how-tos. I'll also introduce you to the basic OpenMRS ecosystem, that is other tools and applications that work with OpenMRS. And finally, I'll introduce you to interacting with OpenMRS and how you can be a community member. So, starting off, what is OpenMRS? We like to think of OpenMRS as more than just a software. We think of OpenMRS as a community that drives the development of a software system. So that means that OpenMRS is more than just a software. It's basically a group of people who have joined together to address a specific need. So what is the OpenMRS platform? Well, the OpenMRS platform is an open source medical record system platform that's designed specifically for use across underserved settings. It's distributed under the Mozilla Public License version 2.0. OpenMRS was first conceived back in 2004 and implemented in Kenya in 2006. Since then, we have undergone widespread adoption. I think we currently stand at somewhere around 40 implementations across the world. So when talking about OpenMRS, it's very important to understand who adopts OpenMRS and why. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot from atlas.openmrs.org. We have a module where we allow users to voluntarily sign in and share information about the implementation. So it's totally voluntarily. As you can see, there are different types of people using OpenMRS for different reasons. There are people using OpenMRS for research, clinical work, for development, evaluation, many reasons. We also collect information such as which version of using and who the main contact people are. So if you look at the map, you will see that OpenMRS is basically spread across the world, and there's a lot of regional presence across underserved settings. So why do we collect this information? To help you get a better understanding of how OpenMRS works and where you can go for help. Also, please note that this is very voluntary, so that means that many people who have actual implementations don't provide us with the information. So in truth, we have much more implementations than seen in this map. So again, what can OpenMRS be used for? Well, many reasons. Obviously for clinical care, it's widely used for clinical care. It's also used as a teaching tool. Many organizations, especially in the US, use it for research. It's also used for public health purposes. For example, if you want to potentially identify cases of high-risk infectious diseases or perform syndromic surveillance, OpenMRS is being used for that purpose. We have what is called notifiable condition detection. And in this capacity, it's being used in the United States for statewide syndromic surveillance. As a component of larger health information architecture, it's used for shared health record. That is basically it's used to collect data from multiple settings and make it usable and accessible to a large number of people. It's also used as a terminology registry. That is basically it's used as a repository of terminology, as a dictionary. So I know there's a big difference between talking about system and trying it out yourself and playing about with the controls. So we do have a number of public demos. You can go to demo.openmrs.org and log in there and play with the system there. But please note that this is a public demo, so there's a lot of people actually interacting with the system. So what we do is we basically scrub the data on this online platform every night. If you want to have a more robust demonstration system, I recommend that you use the OpenMRS standalone. Basically, what it does is it provides you with a zip file, and you just need one click to make a runnable OpenMRS instance with some demo data. So that's a more viable solution in the long term. If you want to set up a demo that involves multiple people or a small community, I suggest setting it up on your machine using Apache Tomcat and MySQL. We provide very detailed instructions on how to do this, and we can also provide you with help to the community. Let me provide you with a quick technical overview. I won't go very deep. I'll just explain the basics. OpenMRS is built on your basic open source Java components. If you look at the presentation layer, we have the usual HTML, JSP, jQuery combination. The service layer, basically the meat of the OpenMRS platform, is purely Java and Spring based. We use Spring for a large number of purposes. We use Spring for security and authentication. We use it for managing model view controller layouts. We use it also for things like localization and internationalization. So Spring is widely used. In terms of the database layer, we use Hibernate to manage observational relational mapping. That means that technically we can stay independent of databases. Right now, we recommend the use of MySQL, but we are not limited to MySQL. I know that at least a few people have used OpenMRS with Postgres. So Hibernate is how we enable that. Before I go into key features, do we have any questions up?
Yes, Suranga, we just have one question. It's actually, I think you might be mentioning about it in future as well. It goes as, who are the developers of OpenMRS? Can anybody contribute, or do you have designated developers?
About that, I will be talking about that in detail later, but we do not have designated developers as such. We are very much a voluntary organization. So what we have is we have a few senior developers who have been with the community for some time. So they can be either paid developers or they are fully voluntary. What they do is they help newcomers to work with OpenMRS and set up their own features. So no, you don't need any kind of special invitation or a certificate to start working with us. What you need to do is you need to go to OpenMRS, figure out bugs, talk to the community, and you can start working right away. I will talk more about that at the very end of the session as well. Does that answer?
Yes, Suranga, I think we can proceed.
Okay. So let me continue. I'll be explaining a few key features over the next few slides. Please note we have a lot of features. I'm only talking about the very fundamental features that are pretty much what OpenMRS is about. So what do we have in OpenMRS? We have a central concept dictionary. We have support for form design and entry. We have module architecture. We have data import and export, support for various head level HL7 organization endorsed standards, and also capacity for localization and internationalization. So what do each of these mean? As I talk about what each of these features are, it's also important to keep a few important matters in mind. Basically, how does OpenMRS evolve? Well, at the very beginning, the OpenMRS founders made a very strong commitment that they would only do what people want them to do. So basically, that means that OpenMRS features and OpenMRS development is driven by very real needs. So for example, that means that just because we understand or think that something is going to be useful for people, we are not going to build it. We are only going to build something if we feel that the community has a very active need for it and that there's an actual want. So we wait until the community is ready before we go ahead building stuff. Also, we have a very wide variety of contributors from all parts of the globe. If you look at our developer resources, you will see an amazingly diverse group of people. We have people from all over the world: Africa, Kenya, India, parts of Asia, Europe, Russia, US. It's very diverse. That's because we have taken a very active effort to make sure that OpenMRS contributors as diverse as possible. We want to make sure that OpenMRS is not limited to just a group of people who are sitting in America, but rather we've taken steps to encourage other people, implementers, people who are actually using the software, to join in and become part of the leadership group and help drive OpenMRS forward. Also, we have the conversation on what we are good at. As an organization, we think OpenMRS is very good at managing clinical record systems. So we also think that other organizations are good at other things that they do. For example, we know people who build lab systems. We know people who manage healthcare standards. So what we do is we focus at what we are good at, and we build strong relationships with other people who are good at what they do. So instead of going over and trying to build our own lab systems, we connect to other people who are good at building lab systems. So basically, we focus on our piece of the pie, and we enable other people who are good at what they are doing, and we work together. So, going back to features, I know many of you won't think that the concept dictionary is a very important feature, but the concept dictionary represents a very important thinking pattern in OpenMRS. As you know, the purpose of clinical record system is to manage data in a standardized way. So to do this, we need a concept dictionary. The concept dictionary is basically like a normal dictionary that you use in the English language or any language. The basic idea is to manage clinical content and help people define them. So in OpenMRS, we have a very robust concept dictionary, and our concept dictionary maps to a large number of different terminologies, from LOINC to SNOMED to RX norm. The idea is that if you use the concept dictionary and its mappings, you can make your data usable across a large number of different settings. For example, you can use your data across multiple healthcare applications. For example, if I create data in OpenMRS using the concept dictionary, I can also move it over to maybe a Cerner application or maybe DHIS2 or any other application that uses the same standards and reuse the data. Also, using the concept dictionary, we can have translations, which makes it easier for other doctors and other clinicians around the world to understand the data we've been persisting. And the same goes to provider networks. So what is the MVP CIEL concept dictionary? So MVP stands for the Millennium Villages Project, and CIEL stands for the Columbia International eHealth Laboratory. So basically, these are the two organizations that joined together to build the MVP CIEL concept dictionary. This is what we call the default concept dictionary, and it maps to a large number of very well-known terminology services. However, that doesn't mean that you're restricted to using that. For example, let's say you want to create data about malaria. You go to the concept dictionary and you look at all terms that are supposed to represent malaria. Let's say you don't find the term that you want. In that case, you have two options. One, you can create that term locally and map it locally so that you can still use the data. Or secondly, you can talk to the people who manage the CIEL dictionary and recommend that someone adds this new concept or this new term into your system. So by doing that, you can actually contribute towards the dictionary as well. So I just wanted to give people an understanding of how a concept looks like. I'm sure many of you have seen this and used this multiple times, but just so that we don't leave anything behind. So when you create a concept, it's important to define things like a fully specified name, a synonym, search name, search terms, short names, descriptions. It's also important to try to understand what kind of data this concept is going to store. We support a large number of data types, from numeric to text to coded to plain text and complex data. In the example you're seeing here, we're trying to create a concept for a numeric data type. So we allow people to set things like absolute high, critical low, absolute low. So why do we use these features? Why do we use these parameters? The idea is that if you create a concept with these parameters, they can be used for later to notify people of dangerous or harmful conditions. So here I'm trying to highlight how people will create mappings. So for example, let's say you created a mapping for maybe malaria or maybe tuberculosis. The concept you created is going to be useless unless you map it to other relevant terminology. So for example, here, in this example, I'm trying to map it to normal city. How we'll do that is we'll create a concept relationship that says it's greater than or same as or smaller than. We'll also point it to the proper source, the proper concept terminology, and enter things like codes. Once we create the concept dictionary, it's important to collect data using that concept dictionary. So we have two different approaches. We have HTML form entry and we have XForms entry. The HTML form entry is basically for web-based forms. It provides you with very nice looking forms that you can use in your web screens. XForms was also created along the same pattern. It both also uses the concept dictionary, but it supports mobile-based systems. So if you have a information system where you need both web and mobile, you should go with XForms. Also, we have what is called a form bank. The idea is that people who have used designed forms of their own share the forms on our OpenMRS wiki so that other people can either copy them, learn from them, or improve them. This is what editing HTML form looks like. So basically what happens is we are using JavaScript and HTML to build your own forms. It's provided through an OpenMRS module. We'll be talking about modules later on. But the idea is that you write up a HTML schema pointing to the correct data points. And once you do, it will display to you as something like this. So for example, this is for John David, and it's a vitals form. It's collecting data for John David's vitals. And here's things like height, weight, temperature, pulse, respiratory rate. Now, remember once when I was showing you the concept, I showed you that we can set things like highest or critical or low. Well, that's where things like that, those fields come in handy. For example, if I enter height that's too high, or a BMI that's too low, or temperature that's too high, that data allows me to provide some kind of alert or warning to users to be careful of this patient. Analysis and reporting. So first you had concepts. Using the concepts, you build forms. And now you need to look at the forms and understand the data that you're capturing. To do that, you need reporting. So we provide the OpenMRS reporting module, and we provide two basic reporting structures. One is row per domain, and the other is indicators. So what happens here is that you use the OpenMRS reporting module and define what kind of reports you want to run on the data that you collect. This example you're seeing here is row per domain. So what happens is, for each instance of a domain, so for example, it can be a patient, it can be an encounter, it can be something else. We define for each of those, collect all the data across the screen. So in this example, what you're seeing is basically data collected for a group of patients. So the first column is basically the patient identifiers, and the next columns represent data that we have collected on them. I believe the second column stands for the patient's birth dates, and the third column stands for patient locations. So this is an example of a row per domain report. Next, we have indicator reports. That's basically run on cohorts of patients. So what happens is we try to ask more generic questions like, for example, in this here, we are asking how many male patients, how many male patients under the age of 15. So I said, for the location Mulundi, check how many male patients under the age of 15 we have during between these two dates. And that's basically indicator report. It provides to you responses and links to all the patients falling into that category. Before we go any further, does anybody have any questions at this point?
Yes, Suranga, we have one question from Guardians Sanjay. He asks, can we extract the concept dictionary from OpenMRS? Could it be used in other systems?
That's actually a very good question. Yes. So that's an example of the OpenMRS community working together with other people. So the OpenMRS community has a very strong relationship with the MVP CIEL group, and their product is basically delivered as a format of a CSV file. So it doesn't have to be just OpenMRS. You can contact the MVP CIEL group and ask for their dictionary, and they will provide you in CSV form. It's a very large dictionary, and basically you can take it in CSV form and use it for whatever reasons that you want. Is that helpful?
Yes, Suranga. Thanks, that's all.
Right. So let me continue. As OpenMRS systems mature, the implementers started to have bigger and more widespread needs. And one of those needs was, how can we take OpenMRS and use it to define our own workflows? Like if you look at the OpenMRS platform, we have defined workflows where people create patients and move on to the dashboard and enter data. Some implementers had the question of how they could define their own user workflows and basically start planning their hospital system according to the workflow that they need. So to do that, we needed something called service-oriented architecture. And to do that, we basically wrote a REST Web Services module. So what happens here is basically, instead of the OpenMRS Web API, we are also exposing a different API using REST. So people who want to build their own APIs or their own workflows can basically talk to the REST Web Service and define their own workflows. The REST Web Service is very widely used, and it has been in use, I think, for at least 4 or 5 years. Many people use it. I can think of 2 very widely known uses, the OpenMRS Android client and the iOS client. So basically, both of these are mobile phone-based clients that interact with the OpenMRS server using the REST Web Services module. This is a screen explaining what service features we support. So if you go and install the OpenMRS REST Services module on the OpenMRS platform, we have a Swagger frontend that shows all the operations you can do. So if you look at this list, you will see that it's very, very comprehensive. Basically, we support pretty much all of the OpenMRS domain objects. For example, for something like a patient, there are so many operations you can do. You can get by identifier, you can get by patient UUID, you can post, you can update. It's very, very extensive, and it's very widely used. If people want to do things like build mobile clients or design their own workflows, the REST service is the way to go. Next, I'll also talk about interoperability support. So what interoperability features or standards do we support? Over the years, we have had a very strong commitment for managing standardized data, and we have taken a lot of trouble to do so. We currently support HL7 version 2, version 3, and FIRE. In terms of HL7 version 2, our support is very, very extensive. We have handlers for passing HL7 version 2 messages within the OpenMRS core itself. And in terms of consuming version 2, there are a large number of modules that people can use. That's also what I call the HL7 query module. Basically, the idea is that if someone sees data that's important or data that they want transferred to a different system, they can use the HL7 query module to capture that data in HL7 message format and export that data. We also have limited support for HL7 version 3, basically for CDA and CCD. We want to have more widespread support, but unfortunately, we didn't think that version 3 was going to have as much widespread use. So in terms of FIRE, FIRE is a very important thing for OpenMRS, majorly because it represents how we changed our thinking. Historically, it has been that people in Europe design standards and people elsewhere basically play catch up. Someone comes up with version 2 or version 3, and elsewhere people try to basically follow and adopt it. And the problem there is that the people in the Western countries develop the standards and they don't think about what other people want. So there's basically a gap in knowledge there. So with FIRE, we want to tackle it in a different way. The OpenMRS leadership basically worked closely with the FIRE architect, Graham Grieve, and the other FIRE developers to make sure that our needs would also be represented. So we worked on developing FIRE support for OpenMRS at the same time that the FIRE standard was maturing, which meant that we could ask them for changes, we could discuss things, we could ask them to consider possibilities where people in emerging economies had different needs. So we think we had an active hand in supporting FIRE development, and we think that FIRE is very useful and robust for use across underserved settings. We currently have the OpenMRS FIRE API, which supports the DSTU2 standard. We also have support for OAuth, which is basically security that FIRE recommends. So it's quite ready and fit to be used. Oops. So at this point, I'm going to talk a little about implementation and give you a very basic idea about how implementing OpenMRS and how to use different OpenMRS modules and components. So here's how I envision the OpenMRS world. You have what you call the OpenMRS platform, which is basically the OpenMRS WAR file. So initially what we had was, we had the OpenMRS platform, and people could configure it for use. They configured it by setting different global properties, they configured it by using forms, they configured it by creating their own concepts. In some cases where they wanted more functionality, they added what is called modules. So very initially, you had the OpenMRS WAR file, you added modules, and you configured it for use. However, as we began to work with different people in the health informatics domain, we tried to create more support for different people with other different tools. So for example, OpenMRS supports clinical informatics software. On the other hand, there are things like lab systems and order entry systems that are also useful tools. So what we came up with was with the concept of OpenMRS distributions. So you have the OpenMRS platform, and you take the platform and you add modules and you add other systems and you make it a distribution. So currently there are two major examples of OpenMRS distributions for people to use. The first is what you call the OpenMRS reference application. So if you look at demo.openmrs.org, what you're basically seeing is the OpenMRS reference application. There's another OpenMRS distribution maintained by the ThoughtWorks community, and that's called Barmini. But that's not all. The idea is that anybody who wants can go on to create their own distributions by integrating whatever components that they want. The idea is that once these people make these distributions available, other implementers can take them, add to them, and configure them for their own use. I'll be talking through each of these distributions and types over the next few slides. Before I take questions one more time, I'll quickly explain what OpenMRS modules are. So as you know, we have the OpenMRS WAR file, which is basically your platform. Now, if people want to extend OpenMRS, for example, say add features that they want, change features, reduce features, things like that, what you need to do is you need to create an OpenMRS module. Currently, there are a large number of different modules that people can use. For example, there's a module for reporting, there's a module for HTML form entry, there's one for file. There are a large number of modules, and all of these are basically freely available. The idea is you take the OpenMRS WAR file, you install that, and you pick out whatever modules you need for other additional functionality and implement that atop. Assuming you have other features that you want to implement on top of this setup, you can write your own modules. We provide very detailed documentation. All you have to do is follow the documentation and write up your module, expose it to the OpenMRS API, and things should work. We also have the concept of community maintained modules versus implementer maintained modules. So the idea is once the module is very widely used, the OpenMRS community starts taking over. And what that means is that we are responsible for maintaining the module and making sure that it doesn't break. When we do that, we make sure that the module is basically usable by everybody across the community and that it's not too generic. In comparison, we have other modules that are very much more specific. They can be implementation specific, they can be region specific, but basically the idea is that we are not responsible for maintaining the module, but that other developers are. Do we have any questions at this point?
Suranga, we have one question from Pengali Herlambang. It goes as, hi, I'm using OpenMRS 2.x version. The user interfaces are friendly. Are there any module development project for 2.x version?
Oh, yes. So when you are using the 2.0 UI, that's basically the reference application, and we have introduced a lot of more custom UI features there. Currently, there are a number of UI projects that we are working on to improve the functionality. The best way to get the idea is to go on IRC channel and talk about it to other OpenMRS developers, or to basically look at talk.openmrs.org. This requires interacting with the community. I'll provide some more steps on how to do that later on in the presentation. I hope that was satisfactory, but I'll be touching base for the community again at the very end. And right now, I think I should. So over the next few slides, I'm trying to explain the difference between the reference application and the OpenMRS platform. As I said, we initially had the OpenMRS platform, which was basically a WAR file, and it worked, but we thought that it could be improved a lot more. So what we did was we built what is called the reference application, which is the first OpenMRS distribution. The idea was that we wrote a bunch of modules that added enhanced UI features and other functionality as a layer over the WAR file. So the idea is the OpenMRS reference application is basically the platform plus a number of modules that work in coordination to provide you with better features. So for example, what you're seeing right now is the login page for the OpenMRS platform with your very basic username, password, login. What you're seeing now is the enhanced login page, where we have also introduced the concept of location-based login. So as I said, basically we are not making any changes to the core API. We are basically adding changes to how it looks. So in this case, it's just more pleasant UI, plus we've added the possibility of using location-based logins. Once you log into the OpenMRS platform using the old version, you see something like this, the admin page. It basically links for everything and a toolbar at the very top. So we've changed that. Using the reference application, what you see is this. You see basically a bunch of applications based on who the user's role is. So if I was a doctor and I logged into the platform, into the reference application, I won't see links. Instead, I'll see these applications which tell me what I, as a doctor, can do. Again, this is what the patient search and create functionality looks like in the OpenMRS WAR file. As you can see, it's pretty basic. You have a find patient where you can type in things, and you have a create patient option where you can create patient names with names and birth dates and things like that. So we've changed that and we've made it a more easy to work with and beautiful approach. There's a tab pane where you can basically work your way through different features. You can also customize this and add your own features to registering patients. You can change variables. You can change absolute highs and lows and things like that. Again, this is the OpenMRS dashboard as it was. So once you create a patient and enter data for that patient, you will see something like this on the patient dashboard. For example, here it's Elizabeth Johnson, 23 years old. So you see things like her BMI. You also see tabs for her overview, visits, demographics, and forms. Below that, you see basically forms that have been entered for that specific patient. We've changed it to something like this. Here we're looking at Mary Perez, age 85 years. So here we have things like diagnosis, vitals, recent visits, and general actions. Now the difference here is that each of these, for example, diagnosis, vitals, allergies, can be configured according to what you want. You can either say, I don't want to see any diagnosis in my patient dashboard, or you can say I only want to see this specific kind of diagnosis in my dashboard. The same goes for vitals. You can basically change what you want. You can also add other things. For example, you can say for this patient, show me all appointments. Or you can say for this patient, show me potential high-risk situations. All of those can be basically configured relatively easily. Under general actions, you can also configure more features. We have things like scheduling appointments, requesting appointments, performing chart searches, and managing patient visits. In the next screen, I'm trying to show how we changed how forms were built. So you're seeing the vitals form for John David. Again, as you can see, it's very basic and it provides you with like very basic UI and functionality on collecting patient vitals. We've changed that to something like this. As you can see, there's a form of validation. So you can enter things like patient temperature and it will check you on whether it's accurate or not. You can modify things and it just allows for a more easier user experience. So next to Bar Mini. As I mentioned earlier, Bar Mini is also an OpenMRS distribution and it's developed by ThoughtWorks. I don't know if many of you have heard of Bar Mini, but I'll give you a very brief introduction. Bar Mini is basically an open source hospital system for role source settings. So what they do is they take the OpenMRS platform and they integrate OpenMRS with two other software systems. There's Odoo, or what was called OpenERP for inventory management. And then there's OpenELIS, which is the open source lab information system, which is used for managing lab data. So basically, Bar Mini took these three open source systems and they configured the systems to work with one another, and they packaged it as a single open source system, an OpenMRS distribution. So implementers have a choice now. They have a choice of the OpenMRS reference application, which is what you saw before. And then you also have the choice of Bar Mini. It's also possible to start with the OpenMRS reference application and switch to Bar Mini and vice versa. Next, I'm going to talk about the OpenMRS ecosystem. So when I say ecosystem, I'm talking about basically other open source systems other components of health information systems that should work with the clinical data entry system. So what are these tools? So first we have the concept of a master patient index. So what is a master patient index? If you're working with large scale national or regional information, health information, you'll see that many providers don't want to duplicate patient data across multiple systems. So for example, let's say you have 2 hospitals and a patient visits both hospitals. Basically, you don't want to replicate the same patient's data across 2 different hospital systems. So what you do is you have a different software application record and maintain the patient's unique ID. So that's what a master patient index is. Currently, there are a number of standards that work with master patient indexes and allow people to exchange data. So what we have done is we have built support for OpenMRS to work with such master patient indexes. The HISSL organization endorses 2 standards, PICS, which is the Patient Identity Cross-Referencing Profile, and PDQ, which is the Patient Demographics Query. We build support for people to use these 2 queries and connect with 2 different master patient indexes. The first is OpenEMPI and the second is MedicCR. However, we are not limited to just these 2. The idea is that anything that supports HL7 mandated standards can connect with OpenMRS. What you're seeing is basically OpenMRS in use with such a master patient index. So what happens in this? I'm sorry. Let me quickly go back to that slide. What you're seeing here is how a provider is trying to create a patient. So provider comes into the screen, provider enters patient data, and the provider says, create this patient. What happens is that we send a query to the existing master patient index, and the MPI returns a message saying, warning, there's a patient who is similar to the one you are creating already in the system. Do you mean to create a new patient, or do you want to use the existing patient? So this is one example of how it works in a production instance. So the second situation, what if you want to send out reminders or alerts? This is a widely used use case, and there are so many different ways to do this. Basically, the idea is once you create a patient on the system and you are monitoring the patient, and you identify what may be a high-risk situation, or you might want to send a reminder to the patient and ask the patient to return or to perform some other specific action. So again, as I said, there are so many ways to do this. And as one example, I'll point you to Rapid SMS. So what is Rapid SMS? It's a free and open source messaging framework that's used by many mobile services. It's built atop Python and Django. As an example, we use this in Rwanda for a maternal care use case. So what if you want to report to a public registry? For example, what if in your health system you have an immunization registry, or you have a cancer registry, or you have an AIDS registry? What if you want to report any potential cases of a specific disease to such a public registry? That's where notifiable condition detection comes into play. The idea is that whenever somebody creates patient data, the OpenMRS platform listens to this data, evaluates the message, identifies if the disease is a possible notifiable disease or notifiable condition, and then performs appropriate actions, for example, sending reminders or forwarding messages to a public health registry. This module is widely used. It's even in use in America. For example, with the recent biohealth threats and bioattack worries that America had, they've started using OpenMRS NCD across many states. It's used for managing all patient data across the state of Indiana currently. Connecting to DHIS2, I know that many of you might have questions regarding how to connect to DHIS2. Our policy is that DHIS2 is an excellent tool and we widely support DHIS2. In addition, there are other data aggregation tools that we also support and also would also help people work with. There are multiple options and ways of doing this, and they are in various stages of use. I won't talk about that in more detail because I'm sure we'll be talking about that over the next presentations to come. Again, a different concept. What if patients needed to move between clinics? So what if you had a patient come into clinic A and you wanted to move that patient to clinic B? That's where the concept of health information exchange comes into play. I know some of you at least have worked in this, and it's a widely known concept. The OpenMRS community works very closely with what is called OpenHIE, or the Open Health Information Exchange. The idea is that people who collect data using OpenMRS or any other point of care application can exchange patient data across multiple settings. So for example, data collected in the first city or the first hospital can be sent to the second hospital and again synchronized back. OpenMRS is already being used as a component of the HIE in Rwanda. Here is basically a diagram of health information exchange. I just want to put it up here because I could show like how widely OpenMRS can be used. So for example, here we see point of care service applications, which is where data is being collected. And then we have the health information exchange up there, where the data is basically synchronized across multiple systems. I can't explain this in a very detailed way because we are constrained by time, but I want to point out that OpenMRS currently can support multiple of these components. For example, if you have a healthcare clinic as a point of service application, you can use OpenMRS for that. If you are sending out healthcare workers with mobile phones that basically run the OpenMRS iOS or Android client, though they can also perform as the point of service application. Up in the health information exchange, OpenMRS can function as the shared health record, that is, the repository of all OpenMRS data collected across the entire region. OpenMRS can also function as the terminology registry and has been used in that capacity by a number of implementations. Next, OpenMRS and the smart platform. So, what is the smart platform? As I mentioned earlier, I said that OpenMRS had a strong commitment to work with emerging software to make sure that there was no divide between the underserved settings and the more advanced settings. So the idea was that OpenMRS will work very closely with up-and-coming technology to make sure that people everywhere across the world can also benefit from the same tools as soon as they were created. So the smart platform is one such example. Think of smart as basically a front end that's pluggable to a standardized healthcare database. So what the smart platform organizations have done is they have built a number of standardized front ends or applications, front-end applications that can be used to perform certain standardized care actions. So the idea is that the smart platform exposes their API using FHIR, and any other patient record system that supports FHIR as a standard can integrate with the smart platform and use the smart platform front-end or the smart screens for patient care. So the possibility is that you're not restricted to just using the OpenMRS front-end. So for example, you don't need to work with just the OpenMRS screens or any other mobile-based screens. If you have a specific care purpose that you want to support, you can basically go to the smart platform system, identify a good front-end that works for you, and integrate your database with OpenMRS, the OpenMRS database, with this system. Listed here are a bunch of smart applications that are already supported. For example, there are things for BP centiles, there are things for cardiac risk, there are things for clinical data, HIE, there are also things for pediatric growth. The idea is that basically anyone who wants to use these applications can integrate to them and then won't be restricted to using just our own UI. The next initiative I want to talk to you about is the OHDSI framework. So what is OHDSI? OHDSI is basically another up-and-coming initiative. It stands for the Observational Health Data Sciences and Informatics. OHDSI is somewhat similar to what DHIS is doing. Their effort is to basically look at clinical data that's being collected, standardize this data, and perform large-scale analytics across multiple disciplines. So, for example, OHDSI understands that people managing clinical data don't have exposure to a large number of different clinical practices. So what they do is they work with those people with those expertise to manage a number of different scenarios or different aggregate systems for data entry. So right now they support disciplines like clinical medicine, biostatistics, and epidemiology. So as an example, here you are seeing OpenMRS data being used with the OHDSI's Achilles application. So initially you saw how the OpenMRS reporting module could be used to perform specific reports or to create specific data sets. The OHDSI application works in a similar way. So what it has done here is it has gone through the OpenMRS database and it has broken down the OpenMRS data using the Achilles database, Achilles application. Here it's showing the population of patients by gender. It's showing the age breakdown at the first observation. And it's also showing the percentage of population breakdown and people breakdown by date. This is just one example. OHDSI provides a number of other applications to support drug-drug interactions, harmful conditions, and cancer care, etc. I will stop at this point and ask if there are any questions based on what I have said.
Suranga, we have several general questions and country-specific ones. Do you want to take it at this moment, or are you going to proceed and we can take them at towards the end of the session?
I think we will, if they are all that generic, I think we should take them at the very end.
Yeah.
I must say I prepared for a 1 hour session, so we don't have a lot more to cover. We'll be just talking about interacting with the community. So that section might cover many of the questions, but I think I'll talk through these few slides and then go on to the next questions.
Yes, sure. That's better.
Sorry about that. So now that we have a very brief idea of OpenMRS and how different components within OpenMRS work and function, I'll talk about how to interact with the OpenMRS community. So as I mentioned before, OpenMRS places more emphasis on the people rather than just the software. We think of ourselves as a group of people who basically output the software. So for us, the people are more important. Currently, OpenMRS is largely driven by volunteers, people who work on their free time just because it interests them. We are fully open source and we are very open to open source principles. So what does that mean? That means that there is a lot of freedom within the community to do whatever you want. So let me talk through communication channels and integration with the community and how to be a better participant within the OpenMRS platform. So let's say you're a newbie, or let's say you're someone who is working at a specific company or an organization and you've been asked to do something. So how will you interact with OpenMRS? So the first option is you can go on IRC and you can chat real time with any community participant. So once again, I don't know how many of you have used IRC before. It stands for Internet Relay Client. It's very similar to a Skype group chat. The idea is that you can come in, log in, introduce yourself, and ask basic questions about difficulties that you're having in either communicating or implementing OpenMRS. If you use the OpenMRS IRC channel, you will be exposed to a large number of different people who will be more readily available to help you. We recommend you use IRC over contacting specific people because IRC exposes your questions and problems to more people, whereas a mail might just do it to one person. So IRC is a way of chatting or having quick chats with people. But if you want to have more long-drawn conversations or more technical conversations, we have we have basically an online forum called talk.openmrs.org. It's powered by Discourse, and basically it can be used as a mailing list. We have a number of different talk forums. There's one for developers, there's one for implementers, and there are several others. The idea is if you are encountering specific problems, you can go to talk.openmrs.org. You can post your question, and you can have help from the community to solve your specific question. We also have wiki.openmrs.org. We put a lot of focus and effort into maintaining our wiki documentation. So before you ask a specific question, you might want to go on the internet and search whether it has been asked before. Chances are that your questions may have been raised before. If so, you can find a very big source of information online. You are welcome to read the wiki documentation. You are welcome to propose changes. You are welcome to basically use it as you see fit. And also, again, we understand that we are not perfect, so we are sure to have a large number of bugs in our system. You may also encounter very many potential methods of improvement. So if you see a bug or a source of improvement, we recommend that you go to our Jira file ticket management system, which is under issues.openmrs.org. So go there, create an ID, log in, and report that system. We don't know how prompt we can be in fixing it, but we can, the community volunteers can basically help you and talk to you, and they will try to get it fixed as soon as possible. So what I mentioned above was a few ways of interacting with the community. There are also a number of weekly meetings that you can participate in. For example, every Thursday we have the OpenMRS developers call. And every Mondays and Wednesdays we have project design calls, and I believe there's also a university call that's managed based on user needs. So what do we discuss during these meetings? Basically anything that the community requires. So for example, let's say you're working on a specific implementation and you have a technical issue that you would like to get more input on. What you could do is you can go onto one of the weekly meetings pages on the wiki and suggest that we discuss a given topic during an upcoming OpenMRS design meeting. Once you make that suggestion, we can act on that and we can help you get it scheduled. And during the meeting, we can talk to you about your problem and get a more widespread input on how to solve it. As I said, the meetings are basically just one way of getting support from the community. We widely encourage you to take part and we actively participate in it. They are basically driven by your needs. That explains what I thought would be a very brief overview of the community and how to interact with it. I would recommend you to join in as much as you want. We are a very friendly and very open community. We have always taken a lot of effort to help people as much as we can. So I'm sure you will have a very positive experience doing so. Pramod, I think we can take questions at this point.
Yes, thank you very much for the very informative, elaborated first session, Suranga. We can now move on to a brief Q&A session. I would like to remind you, please use the Q&A box on your right panel to type in your questions, and we will try our best to accommodate all the questions that you can ask. We can also provide facility to ask questions using voice, provided if you have a good internet connectivity and minimum background disturbance. Please mention in Q&A box if you are available for connecting via voice. We have several questions touched in different areas. I would take the question asked by Dr. Jayatri Vijayaratne. She asked about the concepts. Are they modifiable? If so, where is it stored? I'm repeating the question again about the concepts. Are they modifiable? If so, where is it stored?
So about the concept dictionary, the idea is that we want to promote better use of concepts, but at the same time, we don't want to restrict you. So all concepts, once they are imported, are stored within the OpenMRS database. So the idea is when you install OpenMRS, you get the concept dictionary installed. However, that doesn't mean you need to use that doesn't mean that you have to use exactly that. If you want to, you can go and create new concepts, and there is absolutely no problem with that at all. On the other hand, if you want to make sure that the data that you store can be shared, for example, the data that for example, let's say you created a bunch of data and you want to use that data with a different system. In such a case, I'm afraid that you'll have to make the data standardized. So one way of doing that is, in addition to creating your own concepts, reporting potential misses to the MVP community. And you can communicate with them and explain your specific needs. They are very open. So chances are that they're going to add support for the concepts that you need. So my recommendation is, before you create any concept, first look through the existing concepts, search them by name, and try to understand if the concepts that exist already work for you. If they do, I recommend using them. In event where you don't have the concepts that you need, you can create them. All of these are stored within the OpenMRS database, so you can change them as you see fit. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I hope so, Suranga. There's another question regarding the community. It goes as, how is it possible to request, I'll repeat the question again. How is the community requests are entertained? What is the priority basis? How are the community requests entertained? What is the priority basis?
So the priority basically depends on what kind of issue you're bringing forward. So let's say you're an implementer somewhere in India or Philippines, and you discover a core fundamental bug in the OpenMRS platform. Let's say it's a security bug. Let's say you found out that under a specific condition, you can inject SQL into the OpenMRS platform. In such a case, we consider that to be very high priority, and we would probably put in all our resources to work on that and fix it as soon as possible. So that would be a very high priority. In other cases, let's say things that are like of lesser importance, it might take time. So what happens is this: once you report an issue to the OpenMRS platform, we will have somebody within the community look at the ticket and curate the ticket. So basically, someone will go over your ticket and tag it as very, very important or of low importance based on how we perceive it to be important to the community. So if you report a ticket and you don't have the resources to fix it, it might take some time for the community to fix it based on how important they think it is. However, you can you can encourage people to fix your ticket by talking about it on IRC, and maybe depending on how important it is, trying to offer some kind of bounce to the community to fix it. On the other hand, let's say you identified a problem and you wanted help in fixing it. Let's say you had somebody within your community, a friend who had the skills required to fix it. In that case, they are welcome to fix it and submit a pull request. We fully entertain all pull requests. We don't have a subset of developers who are only allowed to code on OpenMRS. Anybody is welcome to code on OpenMRS. If such a pull request is made, what happens is we will have somebody who has been a member of the community for a long time request and basically make sure that it's up to standard. For example, they might suggest changes or improvements. They will work with you on your pull request and finally merge the system. The idea is that we are not limited. We don't limit who gets to write code for OpenMRS. Anybody can do it. We currently have high school students who actually contribute to OpenMRS. Why do we let them do that? Because we basically evaluate what they do and we carefully monitor what they do. So When they submit code to us, we review it very carefully. We make them fix changes first, then they fix bugs first. And only once they are fully satisfied do we accept the code. So as I said, it's open to anybody, but it depends on how important the community thinks it is, and how much support you can provide to get it fixed. I hope that helps.
Yes, Suranga, I'll take up all the questions related to community at this moment.
Sure.
There is another question. It goes as, do you have country-specific communities or community managers in OpenMRS? I repeat the question. Do you have country-specific communities or community managers in OpenMRS?
That is a very, very excellent question. We've recently started to do that, and we're actually ready to encourage anybody who wants to do that. For example, we already have 2 local communities. One is the East-South community in Kenya, and another is one is the community in Rwanda, and the other is in Kenya. Basically, what happened was we had a large presence within those countries, and people who were within that country wanted to work together and support the implementations, and basically be a source of local expertise. So yes, we do widely support them. The idea is, let's say you're from a specific country or a specific region, and you want to build more local infrastructure and support for OpenMRS within your country. We encourage you to come on the OpenMRS Wiki. We have a set of wiki pages on how to apply to be a local community. There are a few requirements that we ask of you, but these are pretty much basic. We let you do a lot of things that you want to do. Our only aim is to support you in what you do. So once you agree to become a local community and you agree to 1 or 2 very basic expectations, we will work with you to have local leadership and basically help you in setting up implementations, help you in getting trainings organized, things like that. So that's a very good question, and we are very, very happy to welcome anyone who wants to talk further on that topic.
Okay, Suranga, we have another question on the community. It goes as, how can I get a mentor or tutor for OpenMRS development? Okay,
that's a tougher question. It depends on what you want to do. So for example, and also on your level of expertise. So if you're a junior developer who already has some technical skills, the easiest way is to start writing code patches. So once you submit code patches, someone in the community is going to get back to you and suggest changes. And as you work with that person, it will be easier for you to build relationships with them, and they sort of become your de facto mentor as such. So that's just one way of getting a mentor based on the work that you do. We also have what is called the OpenMRS Guides program that's run by a Sri Lankan student named HISSL. The idea is that once someone wants to work on OpenMRS, they reach out to the community, and the Guides program basically tries to help them and put them in touch with the right people. So that's another way of doing things. At the same time, the other question is your mentoring needs restricted to just coding? For example, we have clinicians designing workflows. We have statisticians trying to perform research. We have pediatricians. We have a large number of clinical people. We have people working on terminology. So the question is, what kind of mentorship do you need? If it's coding, then yes, the 2 above mentioned ways. In terms of other kinds of mentoring, the best way is to basically talk on the post on OpenMRS talk and try to understand who can help you. As I mentioned, OpenMRS is largely voluntary, comprised of largely voluntary people. So their time is actually limited, but we do have a lot of focus on trying to mentor people. So I hope you will have a positive experience with that.
Yes, Suranga, we have another question related to the community. It goes as, what would be the role of a community manager?
the role of a community manager. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term cat herding. Well, the idea is that basically a community manager is responsible for managing people or helping people. They are enablers. So in my role, basically what I do is I try to help people within this region as much as possible to do what they want to do. So it's not what I want to do, what OpenMRS want to do, it's what they want to do. So let's say one country comes forward and says, we don't want to implement, we can't implement, we just want to learn. Or we want to train using OpenMRS. Or we can't do clinical care, we just want to research. In that case, my role or any community manager's role is to see how we can support them. So for example, we can get you the resources to offer trainings. We can help you set up your own local infrastructure. We can point you to the right people who can come over and help you. If you want someone to pay somebody to work on your project, we can help you do that. It's largely a role as an enabler. I don't know why the question was asked, but it was basically in terms of wanting to support a local community. But I'll be happy to chat further on that topic if there's more specific conversation.
Sure, I will keep you updated if we get a response from her. In the meantime, there's another question on the community and support. It goes as, are you able to conduct this kind of training for other groups? If so, what is the cost and the process?
So I am not sure what kind of groups that the person who asked the question is talking about. But yes, we do want to support as many people as possible, and we do want to organize trainings. It also depends on what kind of training that you want to organize. If it's developer-based training, or for example, specifically implementation-based things, or do you want workshops on building forms, or do you want consultation in terms of how to manage your systems? But yes, we would like to support all of those. If you have any specific questions on what kind of things you want to do, I would suggest mailing me. I will share my email, or also you can mail community@openmrs.org. I will repeat again, community.openmrs.org. If you send us specific questions about other training events that you want conducted, we can either organize them for you or point you to the right persons, or in case of trainings, like figure out how payments and what kind of expectations are being placed.
Thank you, Suranga. For your convenience, we have displayed the email address in the Q&A box. Moving on to the more general, and actually we have since Suranga already mentioned about Bhamini, we have a question on Bhamini. It goes as, is Bhamini open source? Is it free of use or need to pay for license?
Bhamini is fully free and open source. You don't require to pay for anything. Like us, they work very closely with us. As I know, ThoughtWorks basically gets basically the ThoughtWorks model is that they sometimes offer implementation support and they ask you to pay for that, but that doesn't mean you have to work with them. You can do it fully on your own as well. The ThoughtWorks, the organization, has a large number of OpenMRS contributors within us, within the organization, and they do offer a wide range of free and open support. They also have a demo, I believe. As I know, they have their own mailing lists, and within talk.openmrs.org, they have their own forum where you can ask questions. So no, it won't cost you anything as long as you can do it yourself. And yes, they are very, very welcoming and very open people.
Thank you, Suranga. Regarding the previous question on the OpenMRS particular training, the attendee has responded saying that he will get back to you through email. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Moving on to other, yes. Suranga, do you want, shall I move on to other questions?
Oh, yes, please. I'm sorry.
Yes. There is a question from Dr. Pradeep Silva from Ministry of Health, Sri Lanka. It goes as, is there a reusable repository of workflows? I'll repeat the question. Is there a reusable repository of workflows?
I think in this case, Dr. Pradeep is talking about RESTful workflows.
I'll try to get a confirmation from him if he's available online.
But in this case, I don't believe there is, even if it's that. We don't have a workflow repository as such. On the other hand, you can talk with people who have done that and get support from them. But to the best of my knowledge, there is no such repository as such. Unfortunately.
All right. Moving on to the next question. Is there already a way to validate the data which are entered to the form real time? I'll repeat the question. Is there already a way to validate the data which is entered into the form real time?
Yes, there is. For example, let's say you're collecting a patient's recording a patient's weight. So let's say the doctor makes a mistake and enters something like 1,000 kilograms. He adds an extra zero by mistake. There are two ways of doing that. Remember, the form is basically JavaScript and HTML. So you can basically write your own validation. You can say, if patient entered something that is larger than 200 kilograms, display error message. That's one way. At the other time, remember when I was creating a concept, I showed you a feature where we could say critical or high or wrong. So if the patient, when creating the weight concept, had specified those fields, then yes, they could be reused. If you go to our online demo and look at entering vitals, we already have that kind of support. For example, body temperature can't be higher than a given amount, and there are a number of other validations of that kind, and they are real time and changeable. I hope that was helpful.
Yes. Now we'll move on to more general questions. First question goes as, does OpenMRS allow patient support like education? I'll repeat the question. Does OpenMRS allow patient support like education?
When you say education, I'm assuming that you're talking about things like where patients are notified of potential risky situations, or is it?
I think it's about health education for patients.
So, for example, let's say a patient is overweight and needs to be told to exercise, things like that.
Yes.
So, there were a number of organizations who did that by integrating OpenMRS with telehealth applications. So, for example, here's one way you can do it. When a patient's data is entered into the system, you can use the notifiable condition module to basically identify potential situations. So, like for example, let's say you analyze the patient's weight and think that he's overweight, or that maybe the patient is having Parkinson's and is not exercising. In such a situation, you can send out potential notifications and alerts to the patient, reminding the patient to either exercise or to take specific pills. So, for example, in that case, that can be one potential use of education. You can send a message to patient saying, you have this and this condition, so it's important that you exercise so and so daily. And then there'll be reminders like, did you exercise today? Or did you take your medicine today? Such a system was used for tuberculosis patients in Chile, and I believe it's still being used. It's basically OpenMRS, RapidSMS, and some other telehealth applications. If there are other very specific expectations on what the education is, I'll be happy to answer.
Yes, I'll get back to you, Suranga, on that. Moving on to the next question, it's from Dr. Roshan. What is the support mechanism provided in OpenMRS to communicate with biometric and lab equipment? What is the support mechanism provided in OpenMRS to communicate with biometric and lab equipment?
That is, let's see. So, as I mentioned, we have taken a lot of effort to support standards. So the idea is that if an application supports specific standards, it can communicate with OpenMRS. So for example, let's say we have a specific piece of equipment that performs a lab test. If that machine can basically export HL7 version 2, version 3 or Fire message, then yes, Fire can consume it. We can also do things like make OpenMRS listen to a specific port and obtain that information. Off the top of my head, I think there are at least 2 or 3 specific implementations that do that. I'm unable to tell of specific examples, but it is specifically possible. But although there might be some effort required. Alternatively, I think the Barbary system provides OpenELIS, so they have better support for that. Depending on your use case and depending on what the Barbary support is, you might want to look at Barbary, or you might want to work with the OpenMRS platform and customize it for your specific need. What specific biometric applications did you have in mind, I wonder? But we can get back to that, I think, if Dr. Roshan.
Yes, sure. We have another question from Dr. Roshan. It goes as, if we branch off or develop specific codes on top of an existing OpenMRS version, how easy is it to ensure the forward compatibility with OpenMRS trunk? I'll repeat the question. If we branch off or develop specific codes on top of an existing OpenMRS version, how easy is it to ensure forward compatibility with OpenMRS trunk?
So forking is something that we are very worried about, and we are not certain whether we can do that kind of thing, that we can manage forward compatibility. If you want to change specific functionality or suggest changes, there are 2 ways of doing that. One is to have an in-depth conversation with the community and work on changing the core itself. So for example, let's say you have a requirement and you think OpenMRS will benefit from supporting that requirement. In that case, if the entire community agrees, we can work together to support that specific case. Alternatively, for other examples, you can add modules. So for example, let's say you look at the OpenMRS API and you want to add different domain objects. In that case, it's very easy to add your own module, and that has no problem at all whatsoever. It won't break anything. So I think the major things people should try to do is make sure that their work is aligned with the VAR and that they don't fork the OpenMRS repository. Because if you do that, it's going to be very much harder for you to benefit from other work within the community or to learn from the mistakes that they have made. So yes, I would suggest trying to incorporate changes into the VAR or working on modules or applications that allow you to customize on top of the existing source code.
Yes, the next question we have is actually a combination of 2 questions, both regarding general practitioners. Does OpenMRS has a separate module for general practitioners, and does it allow communicate via mobile platform? Does OpenMRS has a specific module for general practitioners? Does it support communicate via mobile platform?
In terms of general practitioners, so in this case, I think things that users will want to do is collect data and maybe reference patients to specialists and things like that. Currently, there is no specific module. What I think should be done is basically that we create a group of forms that are specifically for general practitioner users. For example, recording the patient's complaint, recording the patient's name, things like that. So if you look at the existing system, I think if you are providing the OpenMRS platform, you can already do things like capturing the patient's vitals, patient's name, address, contact information. That's all fine. I think what you would need to do is create a form for basically capturing the patient's initial complaint and things like that. So capturing a patient's complaint and basic data like that, and also adding a mechanism where you can refer the patient to a specialist or other methods of care. So right now we don't support all of those, but they can be done if you basically write up a form or make small changes to the system. If there were other specific needs that I did not consider, please get back to me on this by raising a question and I'll discuss it further.
The next question we have, it goes as, are modules built for platforms or the reference applications? I'll repeat the question. Are modules built for platform or the reference applications?
Both. So the idea is that you have the OpenMRS VAR and you want to add your own features onto it. So for example, let's say I want to do something like managing a specific domain object that's additional to what's in the code. What I do is I'll write my own module to do that. So when I talked about the reference application, what we did was we basically wrote a bunch of highly specialized modules that work together to make the platform a reference application. So it doesn't really matter. A module can be basically used with the platform or a reference application. It has no problems there. Basically write your module, build the OMOD file and install it to the VAR, and it will work.
Moving on to the next question, it goes as, does OpenMRS meet meaningful use to criteria in the United States? I'll repeat the question. Does OpenMRS meet meaningful to be used for criteria in United States?
That's a bit of a tough question to answer. That question has been asked many times, and I know there are at least a few people who have done that analysis in the past. I know, based on my knowledge, that there at least one implementation of OpenMRS in the US which is meaningful use certified. They did that by making certain changes to the OpenMRS system, and they were basically certified as meaningful use 2 certified. However, that required some work. In many cases, we don't actually follow or keep track of meaningful use. We think it's a good guideline, but many of our implementers don't actually follow meaningful use in many of the countries we serve, so we haven't given it a priority. So long answer, it can be done, and it has been done in at least one case, but it would require some work.
Yes, sir. Moving on to the next question. It says, does OpenMRS allow population health information? I repeat the question. Does OpenMRS allow population health information? I think what the attendee must be referring to is as a health portal representing the health status of whole population, the country like.
So, for example, something like what DHIS2 would provide.
Yeah, should be.
Remember my initial comment about what OpenMRS does. We focus specifically on what we are good at, and if somebody else is doing something that's good, we work with them. So right now what you can do is you can implement OpenMRS, collect your data, and report your data to a system that does that. For example, we support connections to DHIS2, and we're actively working on improving that. I know there are a number of projects that connected OpenMRS with DHIS2. There are still more work happening, but that's very possible. The OHDSI initiative that I talked to you about is another opportunity of doing that. It's also under the works. But yes, we know that there are at least 3 implementations that basically connect OpenMRS with DHIS2 and use OpenMRS for clinical care and DHIS2 for aggregate data reporting. So it is possible.
Suraka, we have still not received any confirmations and clarifications regarding the previous questions that you needed clarifications from the attendees. Once I receive them, I'll get back to you. Moving on to the next question. It goes as, is there a laboratory module for OpenMRS?
There is a lab module, but I don't know if the functionality that the user wants, that the person who asked the question wants, is fully supported. So I believe when we created the lab module, it was basically a way of tracking orders that were sent. So I am not very familiar with the simple lab module, but as I remember, it was basically a way of tracking which patient it was and which lab report was being requested. It didn't have support for basically getting back a response or things like that. So the lab module might not support everything that you want. You might want to integrate OpenELIS or another tool of that nature with OpenMRS. So it might require a little bit of work to get that fully functional. But I guess the first question is, does the lab system that you already have support standards? Because we know many systems, many commercial systems at least, try not to support standards or have very limited support. So it depends on what versions of standards that are supported.
We have a question regarding DHIS2. It goes as, is there an integration between OpenMRS and DHIS2 reports module? Is there an integration between OpenMRS and DHIS2 report module?
That is unfortunately a question I can't answer very accurately, because I know to the best of my knowledge that that was something that people were working on. I think HISSL India had a requirement for it, and I think they built it. And I do think it's available, but I cannot confirm that because it's not something I have been very involved with. You might want to raise that question on talk.openmrs.org, and I'll be happy to help you get that response to that question. But I'm sorry, I can't give you a definite answer.
Okay, now we have several country-specific questions pending, and I think there are about 2 or 3 questions on Sri Lanka also. So I will try to take them one by one. The first question goes as, how is the progress in Sri Lankan community to customize the OpenMRS platform compared to the situation 5 years back in Sri Lanka? I'll repeat the question. How is the progress in Sri Lankan community to customize the OpenMRS platform compared to the situation 5 years back in Sri Lanka?
5 years back is quite some time, and I am not very familiar with the situation in Sri Lanka back at the time. But I will speak about the situation in Sri Lanka now. Sri Lanka has a lot of technical expertise. Sri Lanka is a very rich in terms of knowledge, which is, I think similar to many Asian countries. When we were initially building OpenMRS, we were focusing on Africa, countries that didn't have as much knowledge, resources, or technical resources. And these countries have worked very well with OpenMRS. Compared to these countries, Sri Lanka or other Asian countries, I think India, the Philippines, have a much better hope of succeeding, because I believe that the knowledge and the technical expertise Sri Lankans and many other Asian countries have is quite high considered to other countries, other emerging countries. I've been in Sri Lanka and I've worked with many of the doctors there, and they have a lot of potential. I think it will be very easy. Very easy to get it done and maintain it. It's my personal belief.
Okay, we have a follow-up question from Dr. Saminda Dharmaratna. What sort of Sri Lankan community support is available for customization of OpenMRS to hospital systems? I'll repeat the question. What sort of Sri Lankan community support is available for customization of OpenMRS to hospital systems?
So right now the Sri Lankan community is quite new. We don't have a formal community as such, but we'll be happy to set up one for you. Again, we can help you with training. We can help people set up training programs. We can help point you at the right people. We can help answer your questions. So for example, if you have technical problems, if you have technical difficulties, you are welcome to raise those questions on talk, and we'll be happy to entertain them. I don't know what kind of funding you have or if that's a potential. If there is funding possible, of course, we can connect you to possible developers within Sri Lanka or in the region who can help you. It all depends on how far along you are in the work. And based on what your requirements are. If you want technical support, yes. If you want training, yes, things like that can be done. Based on what the budget is, we can also help with linking you to the right people who can lead development work or consult or things like that. At the same time, I will say that there are a lot of Sri Lankan students who are knowledgeable in OpenMRS and working in the IT sector. So there's a lot of potential. We have a lot of knowledge resources in Sri Lanka who can do it for you.
Thank you, Suranga. There's a follow-up question for that particular question. That is, it goes as, is there any specific customization to support GP system in Sri Lanka? Since EHR systems for GP practice and outpatient department is a burning requirement. I'll repeat the question. Is there any specific customization to support GP systems in Sri Lanka? Since EHR systems for GP practice and outpatient department is a burning requirement.
I will say unfortunately no, unless you want to take OpenMRS and use the features it provides to at least fulfill some of your use cases. We haven't done specific work focusing GPs, but some of the functionality I believe is relatively reusable. We'd be happy to help discuss it and talk about what we can do to improve the system for GP practice, but right now, unfortunately, there's nothing specific for that. At the same time, I think OpenMRS can be used off the box to perform at least some of the use cases that you might need to fulfill.
Since you are the community manager for the Asian and Asia Pacific region, I think the next question is quite suitable. It goes as, how is the use and implementations of OpenMRS in Asian region?
Let's see. I think Sri Lanka, well, not just Sri Lanka, many countries are at a stage where they're actively progressing with the implementations. We have had implementations in many countries, but right now we are at a phase where things are really booming. I know our friends in the Philippines have always had a very strong presence, and they are really going forward with the OpenMRS work. I personally met with a few of them, and they are doing great work, and they are working towards regional infrastructure, which is really nice. In India, ThoughtWorks have been doing a lot of work, and I believe they have at least some regional work underway in terms of connecting systems. There's another organization named IRD, Institute of Research and Development, that's headquartered in Pakistan. So they do a lot of work using OpenMRS, specifically on managing TB and other such care. They work in Tajikistan, Balochistan, and I think Pakistan as well, and Afghanistan, I believe. In Sri Lanka, I think you, Pramod, can talk more about the actual Sri Lankan initiative, but there's quite a lot of work happening, and I hope that work will continue in the future.
Yes, thank you, Suranga. We'll now move on to another technical question. It's from Surayu Sumasono. It goes as, is it possible to connect OpenMRS into XDS environment?
OpenMRS into XDS. So for people who don't know, XDS is basically a standard that is used to connect, share data. So two answers. One way of doing it is basically writing a module that integrates XDS support and connects OpenMRS with the XDS repository. We do not have such a module off the write-off. However, the Open Health Information Exchange community, which has OpenMRS as a component, has built such support. So you might want to look at the OpenHISSL community, because they have a feature where basically people can send XDS documents, and those are stored as within an XDS repository that connects to OpenMRS. So basically, OpenMRS sends XDS documents to another OpenMRS repository, which connects to XDS registry. So it has been done, yes, but as part of a health information exchange. But there are lessons you can learn there and easily copy out to do it.
And I would also like to mention that there are several representatives from various organizations in Sri Lanka. I think some of them may be actively involved in development and implementation works of OpenMRS. You can share your thoughts, and you can express what you have done so far in Sri Lanka. Feel free to join. Moving on to the next question. Can we get ICD-10 codes on X forms?
I think that's already supported. Basically, the idea is that ICD-10 codes are already part of the concept dictionary. So basically, it is done already. As long as you identify the right concept and the concept has the ICD-10 code assigned, it works.
There is also another question that is quite related to the previous one. It goes as, can International Classification of Primary Care, 2nd edition, ICPC-2, be used on OpenMRS? I'll repeat the question. Can International Classification of Primary Care, 2nd edition, ICPC-2, be used on OpenMRS?
To the best of my knowledge, right now the MVP CIEL dictionary doesn't support that. However, that's not a problem because remember, the CIEL dictionary is just a knowledge resource that we recommend people to use because it's very extensive. So let's say you take the MVP CIEL dictionary or you start from scratch, it doesn't matter. If you have the ICPC2 concept terms, all you have to do is create your own and map them properly using the create concept form. There is no problem whatsoever in doing that. You might want to take the MVP CIEL dictionary and create the new concepts on top of that, or you might just want to start from scratch. That is absolutely okay. Again, we support any kind of standardized concept, standardized terminology. All you need to do is figure out a way to import it into OpenMRS or create it yourself within the platform.
We have another question. It says, are there different OpenMRS installation types?
This connects to a bit to what I mentioned earlier in terms of trying it out. So remember I talked about a standalone. So for example, if you just want to have it for your own use, if you're a GP or if you're just having private practice, you might want to set up the OpenMRS standalone, which is only accessible to you and creates your database. You can also set up the WAR file. I believe the major concern would be, do you want to use the reference application or bar mini or just the platform? Based on that, you need to download the appropriate modules and the WAR file and use specifically that. The standalone again is basically for testing purposes only, or if you're a GP and you have your own practice and only you're accessing your data, then yes, it makes perfect sense to set up the standalone on your machine. It's just basically one click and you can use it to record data on your patients. I'm happy to talk about that in more detail if you have any more questions.
Yes, sir. The next question we have is a bit of a general question. Please share with us the challenges and issues you have faced so far during your implementations of OpenMRS around the globe. Please share with us the challenges and issues you have experienced so far while implementing OpenMRS around the world.
I think the biggest challenge I have faced personally is that many people don't understand that OpenMRS is fully open source and that we really want to help you. So for example, we see a lot of people working on OpenMRS. At the same time, they don't think there's any value of them connecting to us because they don't think we will help them. So if you're a commercial developer, it doesn't matter. If you're paid to do your work, it doesn't matter. If you're an organization that someone else is funding to build on OpenMRS, it doesn't matter. I think the biggest problem I have had is basically making people understand that OpenMRS is fully made up of volunteers and we are fully willing and able to help. And that whatever questions you have, you should come to the community and make friends and talk to us. People sometimes tend to shy away or tend to hide. I would fully encourage you to talk as much as possible because we are a very friendly community and we take a lot of effort to do that. In terms of blockers, I think that would be the most severe blocker that I've ever faced. Because if people talk to us more, they'd understand that we can help them a lot more. So it doesn't matter who you are or what you're up to. Just talk to us and just explain yourself and ask for help.
Yes, the next question we have is, OpenMRS useful in monitoring and control of pandemics like Ebola and Zika? I repeat the question. Is OpenMRS useful in monitoring and control of pandemics like Ebola, Zika?
That's exactly what the USA is using OpenMRS for. So back in the day when anthrax came in and the Americans were really scared about the possibility of bioterrorism, they implemented the NCD module within Indiana. So basically what happens is whenever a patient comes in and gets seen by a GP or at a primary care physician, that patient's data goes to a CDS, a clinical decision support tool, which should be programmed to help identify those cases. So if a doctor's report shows a possibility that this case might be an infectious or pandemic disease, the NCD module can report that. In addition, we also know that OpenMRS was used for Ebola care. You might want to search on YouTube. There were a number of videos on how this was done. It was a project named Blue India, and they basically set up OpenMRS for managing Ebola care across a number of countries, Sierra Leone and a few other countries. So yes, it has been used and it has been widely known to bring benefits in treating these cases.
Yes, we have two more questions pending. The first one goes as, what would be the new features that we can expect in OpenMRS versions to be released in future?
We are working very hard to support order entry. So that's something you should expect. We are also making a lot of effort to build the OpenMRS reference application because we understand that many implementers don't have the effort necessary to take the platform and change it how they need. So I think you should expect a lot of support for order entry and also in terms of making it more usable. We are also working on clinical decision support, and of course we'll be doing things like improving FHIR and web services. One way of understanding what the OpenMRS community is focused on is to look at our technical roadmap, which is on the OpenMRS wiki. If you go there, you can see like what our ambitions are for the next months and years, and even if you want, you can even recommend, propose what other things we should look at.
Actually, we have one more question. It goes as, do you see people making standalone applications as a challenge to OpenMRS?
People making standalone applications.
Yes.
I think the user is referring to other different healthcare applications and tools.
Yeah, should be.
No, because as I said, OpenMRS is more than just a platform. It just happens that we are a group of people, and it just happens that we are producing a tool. If other applications are better than us, we are more than happy to help, and that's why we actively work on connecting the systems. If one day along a platform comes that is better than us, we'll be more than happy to even merge with them and help them. We don't mind. Our actual need is to help improve clinical care, and I think that reflects a lot of our work, because no matter what system comes up and is shown to work, we actively work on helping people connect to that. So for example, lab system A comes up and is very good. We support people from OpenMRS linking that and using that system. So we have no problem whatsoever, and we will help you do that.
Yes, coming towards the end of session, the final question we have is, how do you plan on conducting the future sessions of this training program? What are the topics you expect to cover? I'll repeat the question. How do you plan on conducting the future sessions of this training program? What are the topics you expect to cover?
So I've already had a discussion on this with a number of the other people who are helping me coordinate this. I expect that many of you already knew a lot of the things that I talked about. Many of you have worked on OpenMRS. I have seen the feedback that was collected from the questionnaire before, and that indicates that many people wanted implementation-focused discussions. So what I propose to do is I propose to take back the questionnaire feedback to our community manager and we'll talk about what kind of implementation scenarios or what kind of cases that would be most useful to you. We might also contact your group, the AeHIN group, to ask about what you think will be more beneficial. And we'll work on identifying good speakers. For example, I won't be conducting all the sessions. I'll be talking to other people who are good at what they do. So it all depends on what you want. As I said, we want to encourage you. And today's session was basically just the foundation stone, because I believe the more important things are going to happen from this point onwards, because many people are familiar with what I talked. So it will be implementation focused. It will also we will also cover development based on what you need, and it will be totally on what you need. We will also talk about, I believe, the ecosystem. So in terms of integrating to other systems and how that can be done as well.
Yes, that's all the questions that we have so far. Suranga, any further remarks you want to make before we wind up?
I think it was a pleasure to talk to all of you, and I'm very thankful to HISSL and Dr. Vajira for giving me this opportunity. I have already interacted with many of you, I believe, offline and in person. I think this is the first time that I've actually met with you as AeHIN as a group. I hope to continue this session and bring in other speakers, and I hope that what we do is going to be useful to all of you. And as I said, please feel free to talk to us talk to the OpenMRS community. We always encourage newcomers.
Okay. Since we have run short of time, we'll be concluding the first session of online OpenMRS training program for today. If you have further questions to ask from Suranga, please feel free to forward them to us. We will also make sure to distribute the resource material and the answers to the questions to you via email. We will be grateful if you could also submit the feedback form we'll be sending to you via email after this webinar. We shall let you know the dates and topics of next sessions in due time. I must thank the resource person for today's special AeHIN hour, Suranga Kasuraratne, for his valuable contribution in enhancing our knowledge on OpenMRS on behalf of Health Informatics Society of Sri Lanka and Asia eHealth Information Network. And also my sincere gratitude extends to Charis from AeHIN Secretariat, Dr. Megha Ganevatta and Dr. Nishan Silva, who are currently with me coordinating the session from Sri Lanka. We'll be meeting again with the second session in near future. Until then, bye-bye from Colombo.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.